Hello friends, in this video I will show you 10 brutal facts about life in Genghis Khan's horde. Life in a Mongolian horde meant giving up the simplest comforts and doing some pretty terrifying things. You will be amazed by these 10 facts. 10. Mongolians never clean their clothes. The Mongolians of the time of Genghis Khan believed that polluting the water would anger the dragons that controlled its cycle. They were afraid that if they polluted the water, the gods would send a storm to destroy their homes, so they did not wash anything. Bathing in running water or washing your clothes was forbidden. Most Mongolian fighters did not change their clothes. At most, they beat their coats to get the lice out and then put them back on. They wore the same thing, day after day, until it literally rotted and couldn't be worn anymore. They didn't wash the dishes with water either. Instead, they washed their plates with the broth left over from the last meal. Then they poured the used broth back into the pot and cooked their next meal in it. It was smelly, but they took pride in it. There was a strength to their stench. It would be an honor if a great Khan gave someone his mantle, not just because he had his clothes, but because he was now able to bear the Khan's stench. 9. They learned to ride a horse when they were 3 years old. As soon as Mongolians could walk, they learned to ride horses. Every family had a horse, whether they were rich or poor, soldiers or farmers. Even shepherds took care of their flocks on horseback. They had to be groomed at an early age, so they started when they were 3 years old. Mongolians had saddles specifically for children, designed with some extra safety features to make sure they wouldn't get hurt. They wanted their children to start playing sports as soon as possible. It makes a big difference. When the Europeans saw them, they responded that the little girls in Mongolia were better at riding horses than most European men. The children also learned archery. Once they started riding, they were given small bows and learned to shoot. For Mongolians in the time of the great Khans, riding a horse and shooting a bow was as essential as learning to walk. 8. They drank blood from a cut vein in their horses' necks. The Mongolian army covered incredible distances. In one day, they could travel 80 miles, 129 kilometers, an absolutely unheard of distance in their time. It took an intense and fierce journey to do this, and they did not have time to stop to eat. To make the journey possible, they would put raw meat on the backs of their horses. It is believed that this was to tenderize the meat so they could eat it on the go, although this is debated. Some now believe that the meat was intended for the horse, and was meant to help heal their sores as they undertook incredible journeys. Marco Polo claimed that these warriors would ride for 10 days straight without stopping long enough to light a fire. When they were thirsty, they would make a hole in their horses' necks and drink the blood that came out. The horses helped them drink as well. They would ride the female horses whenever possible and milk them when they stopped. Then they'd take that milk with them, let it ferment and turn into an alcoholic drink for the road. 7. They cut the breasts of animals and slaughter them. Mongolians hardly eat vegetables. From time to time, they would gather some wild plants or eat some of the food provided to them by the surrendering army, but they mostly relied on meat and dairy products. Their diet, essentially, was the exact opposite of vegetarianism, and the way they prepared it was the exact opposite of kosher. If they wanted to slaughter an animal, they tied the animal, stuck a knife in its chest, and then cut it. Then they would reach her heart and press on it to fill the corpse with blood. They would tear out all his internal organs and cook them. Every part of the animal's body is used, usually boiled in a pot of broth, but on special occasions, cooked on a skewer. The blood would be drained from the body and turned into sausage. Normally, they would eat lamb, but they would eat horses when they could. Horses are usually saved for special occasions, but they will eat whatever horse meat they can. According to one missionary who went to Mongolia, they ate until the Maras gave birth. 6. A Mongolian man can have up to 30 wives. Mongolians were strict about sex outside of marriage. If a man is caught with a married woman, his lips may be cut off. If they were in bed together, he could be killed. If caught with an unmarried virgin, both the man and the woman were killed. However, as long as she married them, the man could have as many women as he wanted, or, more accurately, as many women as he could afford. He had to pay a dowry for each one, and was expected to provide her with her own tent to live in. Some Mongolian men had 30 wives, and the Khans had hundreds. Women had accepted that this was life. It is alleged that after some men spent the night with his wife, he would invite the other wives to share a drink together. 5. The younger son inherited his father's wives. When a Mongolian's life ended, they would make sure his wives were taken care of. His land and possessions were divided between his sons, with the best reward going to the youngest. He will get his father's house, his slaves, and his wives as well. The boy is not expected to marry his mother, but is expected to provide for all of his father's other wives. Although there were no rules stating that he had to do this, he was allowed to take it as his own. It was not uncommon for a young man who had lost his father to take his stepmothers as wives and bring them to his tent. 4. They used psychological warfare. One of the main ways in which Mongolians became effective killers was through the use of psychology. They couldn't conquer so many countries by fighting alone, they needed as many of them as possible to surrender without having to waste the lives of their men. No matter the circumstances, they would hide their numbers. If the opponent's army is larger than their own, they will place dummies on reserve horses or light additional fires to appear more powerful. If their army was larger, they would ride their horses in single file, with branches tied to their tails to hide them in a cloud of dust. They were experts at scaring people. They were traveling with their tents that they could set up before the siege as mobile homes. In at least one case, they used the colors of these tents to terrorize people inside the city walls. First, they set up white tents and told them that if they surrendered now they would be rescued. If they do not surrender, they will set up red tents and tell them that only men will be killed. If the people were still not ready to fight, they would set up black tents, telling them that everyone inside would die. 3. They slaughtered entire cities. The key to their psychological terror was their reputation for brutality. They needed their enemies to believe that if they did not surrender, everyone in the city would be horribly killed. They didn't use any tricks to gain this reputation, they actually did it. If the city didn't surrender, the Mongolian horde would slaughter everyone inside. They gathered the women and children and slaughtered them all. Sometimes they would round up cats and dogs and kill them for good measure. Their heads would be removed and a pyramid would be made of their skulls so anyone passing by would know what happened if you angered the Khan. The most horrific thing was what they did to pregnant women. According to an Arab writer, the Mongolians did not stop killing them. They were going to rip open her stomach and kill the fetus inside. 2. They had to kill the nobles without shedding blood. Mongolians believe that blood contains the spiritual essence of a person. They did not dare to shed the blood of a nobleman, thinking that he would desecrate the ground on which he had fallen. Therefore, when they killed kings, they had to find other ways to do so. Usually, the nobles were suffocated or drowned. If a member of the Khan's family betrayed him, he was usually wrapped in a carpet and thrown into a body of water. But sometimes, they get creative. Genghis Khan took care of one of his rivals by suturing every hole in her body shut and pushing her into the river. They had to get creative with the enemy nobles, too. In one case, they trapped the Russian princes under a board and held a feast above them to strangle them without shedding their blood. In another story, Genghis Khan killed a man by pouring molten silver into his eyes. 1. They threw the diseased corpses over the city walls. The Mongolian army was probably the first to use biological warfare. During their invasion of Europe, they were infected with the Black Plague, and decided to use it to their advantage. Their enemies were holed up inside the city of Kaffa, where the Mongols besieged them. When the Black Plague began killing their people, they realized they could not survive forever. They wanted to make as big an impact as possible before they left, so they threw their dead over the city walls. Any Mongolian who died of the plague was put on a catapult and flown over the walls. On the other hand, the people tried to get rid of these bodies by throwing them into the sea, but this led to the contamination of their water supplies. The plague quickly spread throughout the city. A few people escaped over the city walls and ran west, but it was too late for them. They were already carrying the plague, and as they ran westward, they spread it across Europe. At the end of the video, don't forget to leave us your comments about these terrifying facts. If you liked the video, do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell to receive 2 new videos.